Geneva crew, we're in that exciting spot where we actually get to see each other occasionally because 'tis that season, but 'tis also the season to bring on the conflict that only fantasy football can bring. We're getting dangerously close to the end of the year. After this week now, we're going to have 2 weeks left, so there's lots on the go. Every matchup's going to matter. Points scored are going to really weigh in. And so you got to pay attention, not just to you, but how are the people around you doing? How are the other matchups doing? And can you actually get away with talking crap on the WhatsApp thread before the games? Do you dare to do so and possibly enlist the wrath of the fantasy football gods? Anywho, I'm going to get right into it. Super exciting week, not just again in the NFL, but in our league especially. This week's wrap-up is going to be great too because it leads us into next week, which really gets the playoff juices running, but also another possible social engagement where our trash talk can be to each other's face. Let's see if we have the guts to do so. Anyway, before we get to any of that, let's look at some of the things that happened in this past week in football. Each of the last 2 weeks, I've started this segment by saying, I'm going to go a little shorter this week because blah, 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 blah. I think what really happened was a couple weeks ago, I went way too long. And since then, I've been trying to find that happy little medium. When I started this, I thought this would be a 3 to 5 minute segment, but we're talking about me here. So if I can get it under the 3 to 5, we're doing well. I'm going to shoot for that because I do actually want to talk more about the leagues themselves because we're getting to that point. But I wanted to talk about one big thing that will inevitably end up in a rant for me. I apologize. I've been avoiding talking about the referees, and I've been doing it mostly because there's no real point. And as someone who's coached a ton, I mean, each sport brings on its little different elements and the things that actually make you mad. For instance, in volleyball in a practice, I have no problem refereeing that. Or, in baseball, I think the expectation is you mess up a lot of the time. That's why we know that umpires have certain strike zones, even though they're not supposed to. And robot umpires will be the better whatever. But it's part of the nuances of the game. Basketball, you just can't pay me enough money to be a referee. I feel like every basketball coach that's ever existed has just a disdain, and you just hear nothing but negative comments. To the extent that if I have ever had a team where near the end of the year, the parents and the players like, let's do a parent-player game, coach can ref. I'm like, that's why you have assistants. Get in there. Even my last full-out refereeing of a full game was with the person in the picture on the YouTube page. Dirk Nowitzki was visiting ISK. It's a long, long, awesome story. But effectively, we didn't have a pumped-up adult male-sized basketball to do some of the shooting things we wanted to go and participate in. I'm just going to let that comment sit. We ended up refereeing a game together with the ex-varsity players from both sides, girls and guys co-ed game, and I missed a call because I was staring at Dirk Nowitzki, so no blame. But referees in general can take a lot of heat, and I think in football it's tough, but on the Thursday night and the Sunday night games, a few things were highlighted. I want to go through them as quick as I can here. On the Thursday night game, the biggest thing is, as someone who's occupationally fluid, let's say, I've been able to get up and watch some games or rewatch parts of games or highlights or whatever. And that one, the flags just took me out of it. There were so many flags, so many penalties. I was just done with it by the end. And it almost became a joke. I think even Collinsworth, Al Michaels in that case, made a comment about it being like, oh, of course, like what else can go on? What else is new? I think was his actual line. But the Sunday nighter, the KC Green Bay, proposed a couple really interesting ones, right? We had the Mahomes play where he was going out of bounds, but hadn't gone out yet and got shoved. They called it roughing the passer, which I know is the trend right now. We're more into player safety. And even people like Michael Schur commented on it. I mean, he's someone in the past, he's done like Community and The Good Place, and he's a showrunner for a lot of those, or producer, I think, in those TV shows. Has effectively said American civilization won't go forward until we get rid of all combat sports. But there's kind of return on the other end. MMA is making a big push. They had a huge COVID because they were allowed to go offshore and do what they wanted to do. Clearly, there's a desire for it. Hockey still has fighting. So football is in that gray area. So I think that was an interesting one just because that caused a lot of issues. Even if we do deal with what's allowed and what's not allowed for physical contact, we saw with Pacheco was getting ragdolled on the ground and spun around, but he got up and threw a very aimless punch. But because it was a punch, he's kicked out of the game immediately. Again, he should play hockey. We take breaks to have fights in that sport. But people have helmets on. Like, there was no actual chance of injury in that. Just getting your helmet shook around like a mofo is actually way more challenging. Or just legal hits that can blow up your ACL. Those are damaging. With pads and a helmet, like, what are you really going to do? I was a left, I should have gone, but you get what I mean. But the two big ones with pass interference at the end, I think that's the one that got the most attention. And I hate it because by attention, I of course mean Twitter trolls that have nothing else better to do with their life than just post stuff. But if you actually look at like NFL analysts that kind of know what they're talking about and have experience either by studying the game or playing the game, because I do think both have validity. There was a little bit of confusion, and I think it's kind of interesting what gets more attention. So there's the obvious MVS on that deep ball, and he just got straight up tackled before he touched the ball. It seemed like a very easy pass interference. And to me, instead of arguing the play, it brings out the question I've had, and I know I've Googled the answer, but why can't the coaches challenge a pass interference call? It could be like baseball. They called in New York, and so it's out of their hands. There's this stubbornness that, our subjectivity, and I know that's why, by the way, that's the defense they say. The whole game is subjective. Even holding is a ridiculous, like, Ponzi scheme, but they want to keep it within the ref's purview so that it's consistency, but it's not. I mean, in that particular case, it was obvious. If you called ahead and went to an external body, I can't see a world where they don't call that. So it would get rid of some of that angst and actually, I think, alleviate the pressure on the referees. But there's this macho kind of can't make me change my mind attitude, which is honestly kind of ridiculous. I mean, it really is in NFL. I guess it's a lot like many societies. If you draw that line in the sand, you got to be careful, because then people argue about how you made that line, not the spirit by which you made that decision, right? And nuance is very rarely taken in. That's why we listen to charters that are a couple hundred years old, word by word, even though, like, they didn't have like fridges and stuff there, let alone the technology we have now. So anyway, I think it's an interesting, bigger concept call because there's no way. There's 360 views in the field. We've got camera angles of everything. At some point in time, they're going to turn those decisions over, and you're going to be allowed to challenge them. I guess it's just a matter of when. Now, it didn't necessarily cost the game, because the Chiefs had to full out score the touchdown and I believe the 2-point conversion just to extend it. So it's not like it cost, but compare that to the Hail Mary, where again, Kelsey was just rocked and shoved before he caught the ball, but no one has a problem with that. And I think basketball's in the same vein, where sometimes it's really odd that at the end of a game, we allow for a different set of rules. Like if that was like a 30-yard pass and he got hit in the end zone, it's like, oh, you got to call that. But because it was a Hail Mary, I mean, it was still a throw. It was still a play that was within the time limitations, but we just know that you don't call that one. It's like, basketball, that when you get into penalties, more often than not, and foul calls, by the way, penalty shots don't exist in basketball. Although a free throw competition, I have seen a middle school game go down to free throws because no one could score. That's a whole other story. But it's interesting that the end of a game changes that notation. So if you know the team is fouling, referees almost call in advance. Or the exact opposite, end of a game, you can pretty much stab someone in the paint because the ref doesn't want to make that call to decide the game. Maybe in these sports, we should develop a 20-second purge whistle. So with 20 seconds left, you blow the whistle and then just whatever the hell you want to do goes. I don't know. That's a little gladiatorial, but might work. Anyway, other than the ejections, if you want to see the funny ejection, go just Google Dom in Philadelphia and you can see the security guard. I'm not even going to touch that, but just Google it. It's funny. The guy was wearing perfect sunglasses. It's almost like it was staged. Anyway, on to our leagues, which I said I wanted to talk about. Just before we get to our individual leagues, I've always kind of mentioned the buys here. I believe it's our last week of bye week, so woohoo! And it's Arizona and Washington, and no offense, if you were depending on those two, you're probably in trouble anyway. There's only a handful of players that probably cost people a lot. So aside from injuries, which there were still a bunch I'll get to, I mean, Seattle's running back situation is foggy, and we just came from a Monday nighter that if you are depending on Trevor Lawrence, and you can tell by my face that in some places I am, walking boots are never good. I haven't heard of the decision yet. They don't know how bad it is, but I'm nervous to look. Anyway, this week is a fairly standard one, except for those 2 bye weeks, and we have 2 Monday Night Football games, because why not? I mean, neither one of them are supposed to be good, but why not? Anywho, our leagues are getting intense. We got to focus on them. So let's get to what happened in week 13. In what will likely be one of the more pivotal league structure-based wins of the year, Team Kickass did just that by not just winning and beating our number 1 seed, but 177. That's a monster. That's going to win 98% of your weeks. So if they keep that up, there's not a whole lot we can do. Now, this is a very pivotal one because, again, we're getting down to a couple weeks left. I'm going to focus more on the playoff picture and the implications at the end, but we can't help but notice we've got two teams here that are fighting for different things. Now, Pamela's already made the playoffs, but again, I'm not going to focus on that too much because she is still fighting for seeds. But let's focus on Team Kickass first. You might want to change your name to No Quarterback, No Cry. I mean, Goff did fine for you, and if you watch the game, he actually started off and then just kind of kept going. Other way around. He started off like a house of fire and then calmed down. By the start of it, it looked like they were just going to run away, and you were getting points both from Monty and Goff, and then they chilled, but you can't really complain. It was your wide receivers, man. Deebo Samuel just went off. He was our wide receiver one. CeeDee Lamb didn't quite crack the top 5. There was a few wide receivers who went off, as you can see, because you also had wide receiver 5 down here in your flex in Evans. He has been a monster pickup and actually a league saver. Where you were able to get him in the draft versus what he's produced has been quite crazy. And like I said, with Monty and your running backs, it's not like they were two slouches. Kittle come off to a huge start. I was playing him in another few leagues, so I was actually looking at this, and he kind of did all of his stuff early, and then San Fran just didn't really need his love after that. It was good that your wide receivers went off because, I mean, for kickers and whatnot, we didn't get a whole lot here. And obviously your bench, you had a massive bye week. This definitely was a vulnerable week for you, but a very important week for you. I noticed you did not drop your kickers, so all intents and purposes, Baltimore coming back is going to give you your quarterback and your kicker back. You're going to have your running backs a little more stable, so you got to be feeling good moving forward. Yes, you are currently on the outside looking in, but we'll talk about what has to happen for you to crack that top 4. Pamela, like I said, you don't need to sweat too much, but you want to set yourself up for success. Now, on the positive side, Hill does what Hill always does. I mean, he should be the actual MVP of the NFL. If he doesn't, it's just because they always want to give it to quarterbacks. But you are having some positives and negatives here. Now, on the positives, your wide receiver group could finally start being healthy. Kupp did something for the first time all year. You got to be pumped about that. And as you can see here with Jefferson, it is questionable, not out. There is a lot of sources especially suggesting, since Minnesota is actually in the running, Jefferson is trying to come back. It's very early in the week, so keep your eye on that one. We'll see how it progresses. But you might get one of the best receivers in the league. In fact, in a lot of cases, the number 1 pick of a lot of drafts that weren't quarterback heavy like ours. That's got to feel good. You got a defense that's possibly coming back. You get your running backs, maybe one back from injury, and then Barkley off his bye. So you're looking at a more solid outfit looking forward. But your big ding, Lawrence went off in a foot boot. We don't know what that means yet. He is a tough person in general. Jacksonville is in the playoff hunt, and obviously they're in the driver's seat right now in their conference or in their division. But they're going to need some help and some love. I've heard some people say it might not be, it just might be a sprain. Some have suggested a couple weeks. Now for you, a couple weeks, you got a couple weeks of the playoffs. In the meantime, I imagine you'll be in the quarterback hunt. So bear in mind, Pamela, not the end of the world. You're just trying to gear up now that you're the only one who knows that you're actually going to be making the playoffs. So you just kind of want to make sure you are healthy for a couple weeks. Team Kickass, Kate and Nick, aside from clearly not watching my videos, you're doing well so far. Keep it up, and I bet you squeak in. Speaking of the outside looking in, me tied with Kate and Nick, but I have less points in them, and the fact that they outscored me by 23-ish points this week does not help that situation, but we're both kind of cracking, trying to see if we can climb into that top 4. I helped us out in this case by not only taking down someone in the top 4, but also helping myself out. So I did take down Raph and James, and it actually wasn't super, super close. That had more to do with them than for me. Just looking at them first, I mean, your quarterbacks were still fine. CJ Stroud, maybe you wanted a bit more from him just based on what he's done so far. And same with Hurts. I mean, they hit their predicteds or just on. There are worse things, but they did quite fine, but neither one cracking the top 5 when both of them have been staples in the top 5 recently. The only real top 5 contender you had was your tight end. Ferguson was our tight end 4, I believe, against my tight end 5, so you can just kind of see where our tight ends were this week. But probably the thing you're the most upset about is your bench. You had 2 wide receivers just go off, and you were giving them no love. DK did it early on the Thursday, so you knew you missed 3 touchdowns there. Paka Nakua had another very Paka Nakuan type affair with a touchdown over 100 yards, and he got some rushing yards in. They are looking for alternative ways of using him, especially against Cleveland, who was supposed to have a lockdown D. So, missed your chance on that one. Not like your receivers really dropped the ball. Allen didn't have a stellar outing, but you you're not going to bench Allen because he's had those, weak winning weeks before. Really, it was your running backs. They hunked, but Warren he was getting more love in the Matt Canada offense. We haven't really seen him come through since Pittsburgh has decided they want to score more. They also weren't really in a run-heavy script. They were down early and often to Arizona, which not a lot of people saw coming. It was also a torrential pour. I don't know if people knew this, but the game was actually postponed for about an hour due to how bad the weather was. In fact, they said if it was that bad again, and a storm did hit the area, and they were aware of it. If it happens again, don't be shocked if they move to a neutral location. And then Stevenson got hurt, which sucks for you on that one. He actually started off, though, and he wasn't doing necessarily that great. Offense was at a premium in that game in general. We'll get to that with other people. You can see that here with Herbert. He didn't exactly go off in that game. And Charbonnet did leave the game, and it is not looking uber positive. He's questionable, but on the doubtful side of questionable based on what I've read right now. But let's see what happens. You do have Cook coming back from the bye, so who knows. For me, no one loves people talking about their own team. Murray sucked, and I didn't really love it. Nothing but love for that kid. He did awesome. Kamara was our running back 2 and was our best running back going into the Monday Nighter. I will get to that person in a second. I was actually pretty impressed with my running backs in general. Moss, I thought, could have had a better return to form, but my free agent pick of Atlanta instead of Cleveland was one I was happy about. I did not see Cleveland's situation going well. I took Atlanta because why not bet against the Jets? And they were actually our defense 3, but actually the top defense that was started. The top 2 defenses in Indy and the Chargers were not started. I mean, the Chargers had a shutout, so that helps. Indy I don't know if you saw it, but there was muffed punt versus muffed punt. I'm really enunciating that well, so I don't say something I regret later, but odd one if you want to Google it. So I'm happy. I'm still technically in it, and I need some help. I need the right people to lose, and I need me to win, but that's all I can ask. That's a future me problem. Present me is pretty pumped that I took down our number 2 seed, and the hottest team in our league had an off week. Similar to last week, there was another top scorer, just barely, but I'm putting that one off because that exposes our low score, which I will once again explain to people just in case it's a confusion. I tried to be as clear as I could on the chat group. I know not everyone, I'm not actually judging you. I understand these are long videos. Not everyone has the time, but I appreciated the question. Anyway, let's focus on our 7 versus 8 here. We had Paul, who's taken a lot of heat from me for some of his roster moves recently, came back and shoved it in my face with 143 points. So congratulations, Paul. Kelsey and Frankie aren't super pumped about that one, but let's just kind of go through why here. Now, Paul, your quarterbacks were outstanding. So outstanding that your bench quarterback was actually better. So our quarterback 1 is Purdy. Our quarterback 2 was Geno on your bench. You didn't even need him. Did you need a wide receiver to catch a ball in McLovin? Nah. Did you need a kicker? Nah. Did you need a defense to actually score on the positive? Nah. And you still scored 143. That's the crazy part, is you would expect in that week if you won, it's because the other person tanked it. Kelsey and Frankie put enough points to win. You just did better with your guys. Even look at Eckler. It's shocking here, but your quarterbacks were that strong. And realistically, you were Mr. Monday Night, whether you knew it or not. Etienne overperformed. Okay, your tight end Ingram, he was on our top 5 list. He was our tight end 3 on the week. That's phenomenal to get those kinds of points. Pacheco was looking on fire, but that's not the Monday Nighter. I just kind of saw it there. He's the one that gave the uppercut, so you got to be pretty pumped about that. But going back to our Jacksonville and our Cincy game, obviously, Chase was outstanding. Very few people saw this coming with the quarterback injury. In fact, his quarterback was our quarterback 3 of the week, and no one has him. He's on the free agent or the waiver wire, which I would imagine he will not be by the time this video goes out. So well done, sir. You threw it in my face. You did an awesome performance, and that's with leaving a quarterback on the bench. Kelsey, Frankie, I don't know what you've done to offend all quarterbacks everywhere, but have you had a quarterback stay healthy for more than 4 or 5 weeks in a row? I don't think you have. Even Stafford had his injuries this year. Pickett got popped, and he was doing all right. Definitely better than Trubisky. Anyway, that kind of stinks because you did have some good performances. I mean, Pittman and your flex did just fine. Your running backs were fine. I mean, in another week, if your quarterback normally scores you 15 to 20, that's enough for you to win, right? Even if your quarterback scores 13 points, you win this match. If they scored like 10 points, 7 more, you would have just been short. So let's say 11. Too bad. You also left some love on the bench. Henry was our running back 3. That would have helped you. Laporta was our tight end 1. That would have helped you. And I understand you don't want to put him in front of Kelsey, but yeah, you got a lot of talent, and this is the one problem is you're going to have to balance who does what on a given week, and then try and get a quarterback that doesn't, suddenly explode. So I know you're going to stay competitive to the end. Please keep doing so. It's really important that everyone kind of goes after it each week. Horrible luck. Get all the bad luck out now, and we'll start talking about next season. I was going to say our Widowmaker was made a widow, but that would involve her concubine dying, which I have a vested interest in not happening. But Jackie's just fallen on some pretty bad luck. Now, she had some pretty good luck at the beginning of the year, so don't be crying too much for her. But also, it doesn't help when Juliet and Lara just come out and, pump the gas. 145 is, again, going to win you most weeks anyway, regardless of the week that Jackie had. Let's take a look as to how, again, you were very quarterback heavy. Dax was our quarterback 4, and he's definitely making a push to potentially be maybe MVP of the actual league. I think that's a realistic idea. Who knows? Another solid week for you. Your running backs, Mixon, came out of nowhere to be our running back 1. Again, I wouldn't have bet on that one, but he definitely did. 2 rushing touchdowns certainly helps. And I think just in general, the balance from there. Your running backs in general, if you have 3 running backs and you're averaging, you get 60 points from 3 positions. You got to be happy about that, especially if they're not even quarterback positions. On your bench, not a whole lot. I mean, Etienne coming back, he looked really good. I don't know if you actually watch him. He's fast as hell. Getting the 2 touchdowns, you're going to have some decisions to make because you have 4 legitimately decent running backs, but you're only allowed to start 3. So make the right decision every week and be perfect. No pressure. I say this because obviously, as we know, and when I get to in the next bit, I'm one of those who have a vested interest in maybe you drop in a game so we can pop up. Anyway, speaking of people in the top 4, you do remain both in the playoff hunt, but this is a pretty big swing for Jackie. You've now dropped another place again because you were technically tied for 3rd, but due to points scored, they have you on this one, so you're now down to our last playoff spot. Your quarterbacks, again, really weird. Wilson, you would have thought to be the one to disappoint. Mahomes, supposed to have a decent game. He did have a few drop passes and the pass interferences I was talking about that really would have helped him out. A.J. Brown looked good again, but your running backs just did not perform. Bijan was massive for you the week before. Singletary's been a huge pickup. Out of nowhere, they started going to the backup. And then you had Najee, who, again, every time you play him, he stinks. And every time you bench him, he's awesome. So not much you can really do there. You also were banking on Cincinnati's quarterback sucking, which he was supposed to, and then he just didn't. Now, on your bench, you do have Nico Collins, who went off. So, I mean, I maybe you want to be more creative in your flex spot, use your 2 running backs and then 3 wide receivers because you do have wide receiver depth. But it does seem that whereas in the beginning of the year, you were catching every break, now it feels like whichever move you make, whoever you put on the bench, it sometimes works out, sometimes hasn't. So you can regroup. I believe your buys are pretty much done. You haven't been reliant on Washington or Arizona at all. So you should have a full, and you're one of the few healthy rosters from here, which I'm going to make a big point of both this week and next week. So it is not all lost. You are still in a playoff spot, but Jackie, you better start winning, or someone below, Team Kickass or myself, will be happy to take your spot from you. I've mentioned the table a ton. I do want to go over it quickly because I am getting the understanding that some people do understand this process and maybe some do not. So I just want to let you know. So yes, this is our table after week 13, heading into week 14. 2 things I want to say right off the get-go. Number 1, yes, Paul, Kelsey, Frankie, I apologize. Your teams are out of the playoffs mathematically. You have no chance. But can I beg you on this one, please don't give up on us. I've been in those leagues before. They don't tend to go very well when people are out and then just stop checking. They don't put their lineups in. They drop players. Please don't do any of that stuff. I mean, make ad drops as you normally would. Still be competitive. Still try and win each week. If not, our league kind of sucks, and then teams end up just getting bye weeks, and that's not fair. So we trust your competitive spirit enough. We know you're going to keep going. Plus, I believe in momentum. You start doing this, build momentum for next season. It'll actually help. The second thing is you're going to hear a lot. If anyone here actually follows anything or anyone on fantasy sports, in week 15, you're going to hear that it's playoff week. Now, our playoff week doesn't start till week 16, so we have 2 weeks left of the regular season. In a lot of those other formats, they have 1 week left. The difference is the most common league size is a 12-person league where the top 6 make the playoffs and you have that extra round. We don't have that. It didn't make sense for 6 out of our 8 to make it, so that's why we go the extra week. If you're ever curious, again, you always go to your schedule, boop, and then you just check out who you got and why, okay? Now, the real kind of nuts and bolts of our standing here is our middle piece, but just to kind of clarify, Pamela, yes, no matter what you do, you're going to make the playoffs. It's just a matter on seeding, but you do have a vested interest to be number 1. There is a benefit, let's say, financially, of finishing first after the regular season. I'll maybe put that into the chat group just so more people see it. Raph and James, you might do the math here. And this, when I said earlier that technically you've pretty much clinched, it's because if you lose both games left And even if Team Kickass and I both win, we would have to win and we would have to catch and pass you on points, which, I mean, Team Kickass is closer. Technically, they'd have to score 80 over the next 2 weeks. So it's possible that if you lose the next two and they win the next two and they score a ton of points, they could actually knock you out of the playoffs. And that would also require Jules, Lara, and Jax to win theirs as well. So it is possible, but it's extremely likely that you've made the playoffs. So if you're just curious about that, you're fine. From 3 through 6, this is where it gets interesting, right? We're off by a game, but that's where plus minus or the points for is going to matter the most. Not plus minus, sorry, points for. Technically, if Jules and Lara and Jackie lose and Kickass and myself win, we would have a 4-way tie and it would all go down to point scores. So Jackie, you're probably the most vulnerable to this. You're the lowest scoring team. So if there's a tie, that's why you drop down. So you need to win out just to make sure, because between the two of us, there's a chance that one of us do. But as we're going to see in matchups in the next couple weeks, the matchups will sort out everything as well. Okay, and Jules, Jax, you guys are Jules and Lara, and Jax, you're in the driver's seat. If you win next two, there's nothing that Kickass or I can do. All right, Kate, Nick, and I have no choice if you win out. So we need you to lose. Speaking of which, now it really, really, really matters who you play. And just taking a look, I actually have the two teams that are mathematically eliminated left on my schedule, so I do technically have that schedule bump. But like I said, you would think then I would tell you to stop caring. I'm telling you, please keep caring. It's a better league if you do. I think our matchups, though, the rest of them are going to have some significant value. All matchups are going to matter. Paul against Team Kickass. Paul, you've already mentioned in the chat you are swinging for the fences, and I hope you still do. Be ready to score some points because Team Kickass has been letting people know that they are scoring points on a weekly basis, so expect it. We got a really key matchup. Pamela, number 1. Jules and Lara, number 3. This is huge. Pamela, like I said, there's a vested interest in you hanging on to your number 1 seed, so you're going to want to come out. And Jules, like I said, you really do need to have that win to clinch mentality. I don't even think necessarily a win guarantees it, but certainly a loss doesn't help you out. And that's the same, just different when we talk about Raph and James. You want to win, and then you definitely clinch, and you're fine. Jackie, you need this win. The 3-game slide is too much. You want to jump back into the driver's seat. And like I said, if you win out, you're in the playoffs. So tons of excitement, lots to really focus on. I'm hoping this pumps people up for the weekend because it is definitely something to be pumped up for. I believe for some, if not all of us, we might see each other after the Thursday nighter, but before the Sunday game. So I am hoping this adds spice to this Yuletime season in our conversation, and it can help pepper in a little bit of, not some trash talking, some occasional support. And I don't think it's wrong to look at a friend and to point out their shortcomings. But if you're doing it at them as a person, that's rude. If you do it to their fantasy team, somehow that's socially acceptable. So I hope that conversation gets riddled in. Hope we're excited, folks. Really set up for a super pumped or a super exciting week 14. And like I said, maybe I'll see you on Saturday.